Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, my friends, wherever in the world you are. Welcome to another episode of the Meridian Guild podcast. This time we have a special guest, Dr. Andrew Kerr, who is here to talk with us about, well, a topic everybody's talking about, which is leadership. And Andy, thank you for accepting being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, Andy, let's start this podcast about leadership with a question that sometimes I've been asked to. Some people say, and I believe it, Andy, that never in the history of humanity there has been so much access to books, courses, training material about leadership. Leadership is a hot topic nowadays, and yet whenever people are interviewed, they feel that it's a lack of leadership or that leadership is toxic or negative. How do you explain this paradox, Andy?
I would say that it's part of the human condition that bad leaders seem to flourish, and I think we notice it more now because of all of the books out there. Whereas before we thought that's just the way things are. Now we know that that's not the way things should be, but the way things are. I will say with all the books and everything, one of the interesting things that I would note about leadership that I always try to convey to my students too, is none of the leadership that we look at right now, all the best practices around leadership, none of it's new. I can go back and I can read 2,000-year-old texts or more from the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the Chinese, Japanese, Indians, all across the world. We have the same lessons of leadership. It's part of the human condition of what makes a good leader. What we have the benefit of, I would say, especially the last 40 years, is we have the benefit of research around best practice. So we can identify those by name. We can say, if I do this in conjunction with this, that'll be better, but there's nothing new. So I think that's the important thing for people to realize moving forward. All of these great leadership books out there, they're all saying essentially the same thing. Some of them without research backing, some of them with, but it's nothing new.
Great, that's true. I mean, I like what you're saying. Aristotle and Plato and all these great philosophers gave us a hint about what qualities a leader must have. Most recently, however, let's say in the last part of the last century, in the 20th century, Daniel Goleman came with this concept of the emotional intelligent leader. Some people, Andy, look at that like if a leader is emotional intelligence, people might tend to think, some people, that is a soft leader. What do you think of that misconception?
I think the term leader is thrown around too much. I think we confuse leaders with people that are in leadership way too often. And we can look around the world at some of the horrible dictators and authoritarians that we have running countries in the world. And those are people in leadership, but I would never call them leaders. And so when I hear terms about like emotional intelligence or servant leaders or authentic leader, to me, this is all just components of leadership. I don't think you're an effective leader unless you have those soft skill, emotional intelligence traits, unless you have the skills of a servant leader, unless you're leading authentically. To me, that's not part of leader. I think we just use too many labels for it. I will say that I do not like the term soft skills at all because from a research background, I would call them essential skills. When leaders exhibit and can do these so-called soft skills, to have that emotional intelligence, they have deeper connections with those who work for them. And those people, and if you're going to look at it from a purely selfish standpoint, they have, the research tells us we have higher productivity, we have higher employee morale, and most expensive at all, we have higher employee retention from these leaders. And so it makes sense.
Continue, go on, please.
I'm just saying it makes fiscal sense to be a good person. And that's another part of the leadership research too. You can't fake it and make it. It has to come from a place of sincerity. which also sounds very soft skill-esque. But again, it's, the research tells us this. People that lead from that place of authenticity have much better results.
I love what you're saying, and I really believe it. And yet sometimes I find hard to explain why there are some environments with leaders who are authoritarian, their style is autocratic, let's say, and companies are able to make money, good money, in fact, despite having a leader who inspires fear. Do you think that's sustainable, and why that happens?
I think it is, because they are making money. And that's, I just had this conversation with a group from actually an international company just yesterday, actually, around this same kind of idea. And when you look at these kind of organizations and you look at the leadership with it, they can afford to make all these mistakes. They're going to make money anyway. And they look at only one side. And this was the conversation yesterday. There's only one side they're looking at. They're looking at all of the hard data pieces. And I'm a mixed method person, so just put that out there so anyone watching, listening can already discount me as a social scientist. But I look at both the qualitative and the quantitative side. And so I think a lot of these companies are making decisions strictly on qualitative or on quantitative data and not taking a look at the qualitative side of things. Meaning, I'm not taking into account any context of culture, of what's happening in the world right now, all these different factors that could be influencing the bottom line, so to speak. And it's just a one-sided view is how I try to explain it anyway.
Oh, I like what you're saying. I agree with you. It's not, money, companies are profitable. Of course, we can be patient with that kind of leadership style. But once competition gets tough and you have to be nimble and flexible, it's not easy. And that brings me to my next question. There is this misconception, I think, of the charismatic leader. When we think of leaders, especially in Hollywood, you tend to think that a leader must be like a super extroverted and extremely good at public speaking and dealing with people. And of course, these are very important leadership qualities. But my question, Andy, is, all leaders have to fit into these molds? Is that the only way? What do you think?
No, as 10 or more years ago, I think it was Susan Cain came out with her TED Talk on the quiet power of introverts, and then a follow-up book to that, or maybe it was the book first and the TED, I don't know. I just remember watching the TED before I read the book, and really, because it goes against what that stereotype is of the extroverted, gregarious leader, that there is great power in the people that sit and reflect and process more. But when you look at the research and you look at who gets promoted, who gets these positions, it's usually the more outgoing, extroverted, and I would even say boisterous types that get the positions over people that might actually be much more qualified to lead. Being a leader doesn't mean, being introverted doesn't mean that you're shy and quiet. It's just a particular style, your processing style and interaction style that people have. And certainly that should not limit people from being a leader.
That is true. I agree. That also depends on the area in which the leader or the type of organization, industry, etc. the leader is leading. Like, I cannot imagine a group of scientists that are quietly in the laboratory trying to concentrate discovering the next vaccine to be led by a very noisy, talkative leader. I don't think that will work. So, Andy, another question about that leadership. Have you noticed that when the leader, let's say the CEO, gets into the boardroom and everybody's the VPs are waiting for him or for her to come in, and she or he is upset that day he's like a little bit cranky, a little bit grumpy, and immediately everybody's like, oh, careful when they speak. They don't feel safe. What would you tell us about emotional regulation for leaders?
Well, and so what you're talking about is emotional contagion, is what we would call that in leadership. And so in America, there's a phrase, when mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And so,
I agree.
And so I say that the same with the leader. If a leader's not happy, ain't nobody is happy, because the power of a leader has that. And early on in my own leadership career, I found out that I was my own team, beyond my immediate team, who thought I was a friendly, happy guy, which I am. But the people in the actual division thought I was a really mean and hard person, and that affected me. I'm like, why is this? And it's because I walked around with frowny face all the time. Because when I'm thinking, my brow furrows, and I walk fast between meetings, because for some ridiculous reason, we have meetings end at the top of the hour, and we have the next meeting start at the top of the hour, where K-12 school systems were smart enough to give a passing period. We don't do that in business life. And so I was always like this, trying to get there. And I had nothing to do with anybody. And then once I got that feedback, I started slowing my walks down. Even if it meant I was later for work, I would make sure that in meetings, I didn't furrow my brow when I was thinking, because it gave me that frowny face. And so I adjusted my leadership for those around me. And if it was something real, if it was something where I was actually legit upset about something, I didn't let it show. And then some people would say, well, you weren't being your authentic self. Well, I think I was, in the sense that I'm looking out for my team. I don't need to make them upset because I'm upset about something. Unless everybody needs to be upset about it, and I don't know what that does. We need to accomplish things, not be upset. So, yeah, it's the emotional regulation of leaders is extremely important, and it's very the people that come in storming, mad, and angry creates a whole tone. And if we're looking at it on a brain wave level, when people act at that, when people receive those messages, their brain activity literally goes down as well, versus people that are in a open and secure environment, where then you're able to think more critically and have quite literally higher brain activity.
And talking about self-regulation, emotions, as you know, the Meridian Guild and the Meridian Guild podcast is for a worldwide audience. And this question has to do with culture. For example, I come from Latin America, and leadership styles tend to be hierarchical in my culture, and the leader sometimes is seen with even very formally treated with respect and formality, whereas in the United States, where you are from, and I particularly like very much that style, you can call Bob the CEO or Susie, and directly, like, most informal type of leadership. So what do you think, isn't it that a challenge for a leader dealing with multiple cultures? I know you have experience, you have lived in the Pacific Islands, so what advice would you give to a leader that has to lead people from different geographies and cultures?
The advice I give to leaders now, because that's part of what I teach actually, is to be aware of what's happening. Good leadership is good leadership. And that's a human level. If we look at it at a human level, at a psychological, point of view, that's going to remain the same. What's different is culture, and that's the contextual. Is it a high context or a low context culture? Is it a very collectivist culture, or is it a very individualistic culture, or whatever? And just to do your homework before you go in to, if you're leading a team or if you're going in to meet with people. And it sounds like such common sense, but unfortunately, as we all know, common sense isn't really all that common. And so I always encourage people to do a little homework before you go in. And again, it's not about changing your authentic self. Like, I prefer going in and calling CEOs by their first name. But if I'm coming into El Salvador and you're going to introduce me to a CEO, I'm going to walk in and use titles until told otherwise. And if I'm not told otherwise, that's fine, because I'm a guest in that culture. So being my authentic self and holding on to everything that I think is important, is actually pretty darn rude in my book, and it's also not effective leadership either.
Mm-hmm. Great, Andy. And I know that our time is short, but I wouldn't like to end this episode without talking about something very important. We are living in a VUCA world, very volatile, unexpected, complex, ambiguous. And I want to talk about values. When leaders are facing complex environments and decisions to make, what role do values play in the workbook of a good leader?
So first, let's tell our audience that may not be familiar with VUCA. We're talking about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And if we look at the world in a VUCA framework, there's always going to be those four pieces. And what should never change is the values, because the values are what keep people grounded. And these are things that, when I first learned about visions, it was literally just one of those check mark things that we were told that, we have a vision statement now, okay. And so I never thought much of visions until much later, and when I joined an organization that was truly mission driven. And that was, going on about 16 years now. So, and it was truly vision driven, and we had, throughout all of the VUCA, throughout all of the different issues that we had, we always knew where we stood. We always knew what we weren't going to compromise on, and we always knew what we stood for. And that's a huge value in that. And again, that sounds I live in the world of the soft skills, the so-called soft skills, but my soft skills that I keep referencing, even this, are research-based best practices for leaders. And holding on to those values is extremely important. Once you compromise on values, that erodes everything else within an organization. It can erode everything else in an organization. And because trust, and the foundation of all leadership, regardless of culture, is trust.
I fully agree with you. And that's why sometimes charismatic leaders that apparently are emotional intelligent, when they don't have these values clear and they don't follow them, then it's manipulation. Andy, I think we could continue talking by hours. Unfortunately, our time is over. I would like to thank you for your time. I know that you are you come often to this podcast. We'll continue talking. We have several topics to discuss about with you, like critical thinking and positive psychology, the science of happiness. So we'll have more of you. And for our audience who are listening in different parts of the world, please, you can submit your requests for topics to discuss with Dr. Kerr here and other speakers that will continue coming. And as always, thank you for listening to us. Don't forget to give us like and subscribe to our channel. Until the next episode, thank you very much. Bye, Andy.
Thank you for having me.